Good evening. I'm Mike Knetter. Welcome to our UW Now Livestream series, where we bring you experts from the University of Wisconsin community talking about various aspects of the COVID-19 crisis. Tonight, we're going to get very close to home as we hear from Chancellor Rebecca Blank talking with us this evening about the university's restart efforts, Smart Restart Initiative, and other matters that the university's been grappling with in this very challenging time. Chancellor Blank, as you all know, comes to us after having had a very distinguished career as an academic economist, earned her PhD at MIT, worked at some of the very best economics departments in the country, in particular Northwestern, Princeton, and the University of Michigan. At Michigan, she was the dean of the Ford School for Public Policy. She then spent some time at the Brookings Institution, later went to the U.S. Department of Commerce to run the Census Project, did such a good job that when leadership turned over, she became the Secretary of Commerce in the Obama administration. From that post, she was hired as Chancellor at UW Madison, and all of that experience has certainly been of great benefit to the university. So, Chancellor, thanks for joining us tonight in what has been a very, very challenging semester, not just at UW-Madison, but universities all around the country. We appreciate you taking time to share your thoughts and perspectives with our alumni and friends. And I will cede the floor to you, and we will come back with some questions that I've got, and then our audience questions using the live chat feature on our YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us, Chancellor.
Good. Thank you, Mike, and thanks for asking me. It's always good to talk to the alumni. I've got to correct one thing that Mike said. I was actually the Deputy Secretary of the U.S. Department of Commerce, and I was acting secretary for a while. But, in Washington, these things matter. I was never actually the nominated and confirmed secretary. So I want to talk about what's happening at UW. It has been a most strange fall. It's not the usual semester. And we've been really in the midst of three crises: a crisis related to COVID, a crisis related to budget, and a crisis related to this social revolution around racial justice. But before I talk about crises, I do want to spend just a few minutes talking about the good news. I want to start at the right place, which is what are the things we are proud of here at the University of Wisconsin that are going really well right now. First of all, we have a great freshman class. We hit all of our admissions targets, even in the midst of all of the craziness of COVID. It is the most diverse class we've ever seen. 13.5% of the class are from targeted underrepresented groups. That's up several percentage points from last year. That's not by chance. That's a result of a very clear strategy, as well as increased resources, much of which comes from increases in scholarship funds as a result of all the gifts that our alumni have given us for scholarships in the Always Forward campaign. And if you look at the class overall, there are a little bit fewer international students, and I think we all expected that. It's harder for them to get here this year. A little bit more Wisconsin and Minnesota students, a little bit fewer coastal students, not a lot fewer. The differences are small, but in general, on the margin, people were just staying closer to home this year a little bit. And it might be when this is over, some of those people will transfer over to the University of Wisconsin. In addition to a great freshman class, we've got a great incoming class of new faculty. We welcomed 170 faculty here this summer, and that's the highest number that anyone has seen in the last 25 years. Given our budget problems, we're not going to be hiring that much this year, so I hope everyone is enjoying all of their new colleagues, and it's a wonderful group from across the country and even across the world. And then last, I think this is the best news. This data just came in yesterday. It's our graduation rate data for this past spring. We again hit an all-time high since we were collecting this data. Our 6-year graduation rate is at 88.5%. That's up almost a full percentage point. That puts us among the top 3 in the Big Ten, us, Northwestern, and Michigan, and among the top 10 of all big public universities in the United States. And I'm just proud of that. I'm proud of the great students and the great work that our teachers do. Having talked about that, let me turn to our crises. And let me talk first about COVID. So we laid a lot of plans. I know I came and talked about those plans, I think first week of September. Changed the operations of the university entirely. There's no part of the university that we didn't touch with new health protocols, greater distancing, just changes in how we did business. And we opened with some real hopes, but I have to say the first week our cases spiked, and they spiked fast and they spiked high. And we're still trying to deconstruct what happened. They went up faster than at our peer schools. Almost all the schools saw some spikes, at least I should say all the schools that were testing saw some spikes. But for whatever set of reasons, we went up faster. And we reacted aggressively and fast. At the end of that first week, we put all students on restricted movement for 2 weeks. We turned all classes into online classes for 2 weeks. And we quarantined our 2 largest dorms, Celery and Whitty, for 2 weeks, which is where those spikes were the biggest. I might note a couple of fraternities and sororities also got quarantined at that point. The good news is it worked, and it worked quite well. And that gave us some degree of belief that we could reopen if some things were different. And we reopened with the following differences. By the time we reopened in the second, third week of September, we had much greater testing capacity that we brought online. And that meant we could test people in the dorms once a week rather than once every 2 weeks. We had the capacity to do what's called emergency testing. So if we saw spiking in one of the dorms, we can now go in and the next day test everyone in the dorm, pull out anyone who has an infection, come back 3 or 4 days later, test everyone again, pull out any additional infections that have emerged, and keep that up until you've really got this fully under control. And we didn't quite have that protocol in place at the very beginning. Plus, we've de-densified the dorms quite a bit. If you put up the slide, this is what's happened to our positive cases here on campus. And the on-campus testing is purple. The people who didn't get tested on campus but went to one of the community testing sites are the brown. You can ignore that. It's the totals that matter here. And you can see that very big spike on the 9th of September that we reacted to as quickly as we can. And over those next 2 weeks, the numbers really came down. We've now had more than 2 weeks of very low numbers. This last week, it's been particularly low, and we're doing a lot of testing. We're doing more testing now than we were before. Over the last 2 weeks, our numbers have actually been below the numbers for Dane County, the county in which we sit, and very far below the numbers for Wisconsin. Those of you who are following the news know Wisconsin has seen a huge spike, particularly in the northwestern area of the state, in Oshkosh and Green Bay. And our numbers are really low, and I'm really worried that our students don't travel and don't go elsewhere in the state, and that we keep, where we are. You can take that down. Thank you. Our average number of cases over the last 7 days is 13 per day. That's great. If we can stay there, we're in good shape. And our positivity rate, the percentage of those tested who test positive, is less than 1% over the last 7 days. It's 0.9%. And those are numbers that put us in a very good and strong position. So I'm cautiously optimistic that, we've got this under control. We've got a few things in place we didn't have before. We're going to run through Thanksgiving if we can. And at Thanksgiving, we've still got a week and a half of classes and then final exams. And we're sending everyone home at that point and saying, look, if you go home for Thanksgiving, you should stay home. Don't come back. We don't want people traveling and then returning to Madison at that point, particularly if Wisconsin stays high. Now, there'll be some people who can't go home, who are going to stay in the dorms and even stay over the holidays. And of course, they can stay. But we're purposely going online so people don't leave and come back. Our classes, as I say, we started in a hybrid model, which means all of the large classes were online. We don't have the space to put them someplace socially distanced. A number of our small classes, about 38% of our small classes, were in person in some form or another. And after we turned to 2 weeks of online instruction, there are a few classes that didn't come back. They just said, this doesn't make sense. We've got this worked out now online. But we've got a little under a third of our classes that are still in person. And both the provost and I really believe that in-person classes are really important for our students, and particularly for our freshmen, to interact one-on-one with the faculty, to have some discussions, to have some face-to-face time. And the really good news here of all the health protocols that we put in place on our campus have worked. We have no evidence of any transmission of any infections inside the classroom or inside any of our laboratory spaces. And we have tracked every employee who's become ill, trying to make sure we know where and how they became ill. And in virtually every case, we can track it back to something that happened off campus. So our health protocols are working. The problem is, some students are not following them off campus. The vast majority of our students are doing what we want them to do and doing it wonderfully. But we have been very clear about the discipline for those who don't. We have some 600 plus students who've been referred to student discipline for violating health protocols. We've got 21 students who we are looking at emergency suspensions for. And as we quarantined 2 dorms, we made it very clear we were serious. And I think students have gotten that message, and that's another reason why our infections are down. There's just a lot of uncertainty right now, and it's affecting our faculty, it's affecting our staff, it's affecting our students, and that leads a lot of anxiety as well, and that anxiety tips over into anger very quickly. We've got people who don't want in-person classes. We've got people who really want in-person classes. That's true of both students as well as faculty. And we've tried to accommodate both of that, let people choose where they're going to be. But, it's been very clear, whatever decision we make, we will be roundly criticized. And we simply have to make the decisions we think are the right decisions for the university and move forward with them and be consistent. And I think we've been very consistent over this semester about wanting some in-person classes, enforcing health protocols, and trying everything we can to communicate to all of our community about the importance of staying safe. So not surprisingly, that's the first crisis. All right, we're navigating that one. Not surprisingly, the budget is the second crisis here that emerges out of that. A lot of our revenue sources have plummeted. If you are looking at any of what we call our auxiliaries, these are programs that are completely self-funding. The unions are self-funding. Our dorms and eating facilities are self-funding. Our athletics program is entirely self-funding. The activities in a lot of those areas have really dropped. So a number of our auxiliaries have, budget, they're making like 15% of what they would in a normal year. And, that's a real problem. With the rest of our budget, the biggest problem right now has been state budget lapses. The governor has pulled back money both last fiscal year, which ended July 1st, and this fiscal year. The sum total of that is a loss of somewhere between $40 to $50 million. We don't quite know what that second lapse is. It's going to be in that range. That's a lot of money to lose, of discretionary money that goes into education primarily. And that, together with the auxiliary losses, I will tell you, relative to our budget, has put us in the worst situation that I think anyone has seen around the university. It's a very, very large deficit relative to budget. Now, we've pulled a lot of expenses down and are making a lot of that up by, we've done some furloughs across the board with our faculty and staff. We've frozen salaries, we've frozen hiring, nobody's traveling. There are a number of things that help on this front. But of course, we're also spending more money on health protocols and testing. So, that goes the other direction. We are in the midst of looking at our budget for this next year and are probably in the next month going to be making decisions about what we have to do for the rest of this fiscal year between now and next July to make sure we make it through and have a fiscally sustainable situation as we come out of this next fall. I think all of us believe the spring is going to look like the fall. We are not going to have a vaccine in place. There's going to be infections. We're going to have to continue everything we're doing. Many of us, myself included, hope that there will be something available so that by the spring, by late spring, certainly by summer, there'll be more widespread availability of a vaccine, and next fall might look a little bit more normal. And, that's at least what we're hoping for right now, but we're all watching that space to see how that news evolves. Finally, let me turn to the third crisis, which, if COVID has been consuming us as an immediate short-term emergency, the issues of racial justice and equity, inclusion, diversity, of course, have been on campus for many, many decades. They are not new. And in many ways, I think the impact of the current set of demands and the anger that's coming at us and the demand that we need to be a different and better institution is going to have a bigger long-term impact than COVID. And that's good because there are certainly changes that we do need to make. We are, and I've said this, a white institution in a very white state. And we show that. We show that culturally. We show that in the composition of our class and faculty. Mike mentioned that I released a blog yesterday, and all of you who want to know more about what are the details of some of the things you're trying to do on this front should go back and look at that. To highlight just a few things, we really are working hard on the admissions front. And I noted that, we have the largest and most diverse class that we've ever had. That doesn't mean we can stop. 1 year does not make a trend. We've been inching up slowly. We jumped up this year. We need to keep jumping up and keep working on that front. Similarly, we've done some really good things on faculty diversity. And the one thing I hear more from students of color is they want faculty who look like them and who have some of their cultural experiences teaching them in the classroom. And we launched a program 2 years ago aimed at really incentivizing departments to hire people who are underrepresented in their department. We've authorized 70 hires under that program. That's a big budget commitment. About 32 to 35 of those people have been hired. Many of those hires are still in process. And of those, about 3/4 of them are traditionally underrepresented minorities. The other 1/4 are women in science fields, where there are very, very few women in the department. So, we're really making progress. And despite our budget problems, I've said we're going forward with this program. We need to do this type of diversification. And if we have to do bigger budget cuts elsewhere, this is important. I could keep talking about some of the racial justice issues. We're really trying to look hard at, policing practices, at some of the things we're doing on research. We're funding a special research fund for those who work on issues of inequality and racial inequities to stimulate and encourage more research in that area. We're doing a lot of training initiatives aimed at both students as well as faculty and staff. But we're in this one for the long run. And this is not just about the things that we do out of the center of the university. I've said this again and again to all of our units and our departments. This is something every department, every unit has to take seriously, thinking about what do we do and what can we do better, and taking that on and working on it. This is a long-term project, and I hope we're in it and committed to it. So we will come out of this. We will come out of it with some budget problems. We'll come out of it with some people who are more or less happy about what we did. I know that. One of the things I'm quite committed to doing is generating a discussion this winter about what have we learned from this virus and these changes in how we do business and how we've been operating. That's to our benefit once we're back into a more normal period. An awful lot of our faculty have been using technological tools they've never used before. And I hope that's going to change their teaching and improve their teaching and give them opportunities to combine more use of asynchronous lectures and things like that with in-classroom exercises and discussions that really improve the learning within the classroom. Similarly, there's a lot of operational stuff that we've learned about where you can do telework effectively and where you can't. And we've got to really think about how we incentivize and encourage and set the boundaries around appropriate telework. That in turn affects the space that we need on campus. We've also learned an awful lot about these Zoom meetings, and there's going to be less travel. There's going to be less travel across campus where everyone has to travel for a half an hour to come to a meeting, but there's going to be a lot less travel around the country and the world too, where more professional meetings, at least in part, for some of them take place like this. And that's good too. I mean, that creates another way to both save money and to save time and to put that time into things that are more productive than sitting at airports. So, we're trying to think about not just, how do we get through these next 9 months, though we are thinking about that, but how do we come out stronger and better, a better functioning university and a better functioning educational and research institution. And we have, as you all know, great faculty and great students and great staff. And I have just a wonderful team of senior leaders. And it has, while I won't say the last few weeks have been a joy, I will say the last few months, it's been a joy working with everyone. And I appreciate everyone's flexibility and adaptability and willingness to try some things differently in the midst of a very different world. So let me stop there and turn it back to you, Mike.
Chancellor, thank you for sharing your perspectives and kicking this off. I'm sure you'll generate a lot of audience questions. Before we go to that, I'm going to ask you a few questions that I get from alumni fairly often and wanted to get your take on them. The first question I get very frequently at the end of a call I'll be having with a donor, we'll be kind of wrapping things up, and often people will say, Mike, how's Becky doing? And of course, I give my answer to that, and I'll tell you what that is after you tell me what should I tell them. How are you doing?
I will tell you, I have worked a lot of pretty intense jobs. The last 6 months have been more intense, more hours, and some of it's just we've been changing direction, following the data, trying to be nimble. It has been intense, and I really worry a lot about burnout among some of the senior people who've just been working nonstop for the last 6 months. You've got to find ways to get away from it. And I fortunately have a wonderful husband. Now that it's getting dark early, I don't know what we're going to do. We do try to take walks and, just sort of get out of your head and go do something different on a pretty regular basis. And, that really helps. But, it's been a tough 6 months, and it's not just the work. It's the, in an environment where, like I say, people are anxious, and being anxious, they're angry. And you're dealing with a lot of folks who, really want to get in your face about things. And you just got to take a deep breath and say, this is because they care about the institution and because they're anxious about everything happening in their life. And you need to respond back in a way that indicates you've listened to them.
Well, I tell people your energy, resilience, and optimism are amazing. And I think infectious on the leadership team. I feel like you're energized by challenges, and this is probably, as you know, maybe the greatest professional challenge. These 3 crises, but I think you do a great job of gathering input. But you're still decisive when you need to be, which is really important when we're working remote. All the experience you've had is really paying off for us. It's great that you've been here 7 years. That's really helped. But being forged professionally in the economics profession, as we both were. We know what that's like. It's a lot of tough love without the love. So, you expect, in that environment, you do get a lot of criticism, I guess, just through the normal course of work. But I've never really seen anything quite like this administratively, where an issue, especially, I think the COVID crisis, there's so many cross currents and misalignments in what people want or expect out of the institution that, as you said, any decision you make is going to be met with a lot of criticism, usually coming from both sides. There's very few people that would choose the exact path, but you've done a remarkable job, and we're just so lucky to have, your energy and enthusiasm and optimism at this time. It's really difficult, and really appreciate that. County Executive Parisi has made it clear that he'd sort of prefer that UW students, didn't really even come back to Madison. And I can understand that concern, but how do you respond to those points of view?
Yeah, so speaking of criticism, the county exec has been quite clear that he's not happy with the university. So a couple of things. The first comment is, our students, by and large, were going to be in Madison in any case. Last spring, when we closed down in the middle of March, nobody had any idea what was coming at us and what this virus was. Everybody went home, and they spent the rest of the semester finishing online in their parents' house, by and large. Most of them didn't like that. And when they were planning for this semester, it really didn't matter whether their classes were going to be online or in person. They were going to be here in their housing contracts, in the student neighborhoods or wherever they lived, and living in Madison with their friends and hopefully interacting with campus as much as they could. Now, that means, let's say we didn't bring open the dorms or bring any freshmen back. We still are going to have 35,000 students in Madison. And I can tell you, the majority of those students don't have any in-person classes, but they're here. So the idea that if I would just turn to online classes entirely, I could send the students home is just false. They live here, they work here, they support the economy, they vote here. You really don't want me to send them home now if you want them to vote in this next election. I don't understand quite the sense that the students should go home. When we spiked, I understand there was a lot of concern about that, but we have worked hard to bring that down. And as I say, for the last 2.5 weeks now, we've been below the rest of the county in our counts, and my goal is to stay there. And I think we have some of the testing regimes in place that will help us do that. There's very little evidence that we have spread any disease into the community. As I say, we've not spread it into the campus community. And if it hasn't spread in the campus community, it's not likely it's spread into the larger community. So, I've sort of rejected the call to tell all of my students to go home, and I've rejected the call to turn everything into online classes, because I really don't think that's helpful educationally for those students who want to be in in-person classes, for those faculty who want to teach. I want to give them that opportunity.
On the other side of this, of course, as you know, we have alumni and friends who have a very different point of view, who would say, all the evidence suggests that college age students really aren't getting very sick from the coronavirus. And so why are we taking all these precautions and even making such a big deal out of how many cases there are? What do you say to people who have that point of view?
So, it is true that when we do our dorm testing, the majority of cases that we uncover are asymptomatic. Now, some of them become symptomatic at some point later on when we put them into isolation. But, a lot of these students have at best mild cases, and we have been fortunate that we've had one student who's been hospitalized for a couple of days, and that's it. But you can't bet on this. This is a very unpredictable virus. You don't know ahead of time how sick you're going to be. And we have had students who've been quite sick, not a lot of them. You don't want that to happen to your students while they are here and in campus and under your care. Furthermore, even the asymptomatic ones, are infectious. As we know, watching what's happened in the White House, you don't have to have symptoms to be infectious. And, that does make it dangerous for them to be around other students who may get sicker than they are. It makes them dangerous to go downtown and to restaurants and shop around. And, we want to protect not just the health of our students, but the health of the whole community. And as long as this disease is unpredictable as it is, and as infectious as it is our responsibility, I think, to message as strongly as possible that masking and social distancing, hand washing, all of that stuff is just a really important attribute, a set of activities, whether you are on campus or off campus.
I think one of the moments where we got a particularly large amount or high volume of let's say feedback about our plans here on campus is when we had the juxtaposition of having just quarantined Whitty and Celery, and then not long after that kind of revisited the decision about fall sports in the Big Ten and announced, there would be football after all, starting October 24th. So that seemed a little bit off to some people. How can we be doing the quarantining of dorms and then say we're going to have a football season? Can you kind of unpack how that came about for us a little bit? I mean, you mentioned the quarantining of dorms, but how about the football decision?
Yeah, I bet I spent more time on football in the last 2 months than I really want to or need to. When we decided to postpone play, we got slammed by a whole lot of people. When we decided to resume play, we got slammed by a whole lot of people. This is one where, we're just not going to make anyone happy. Let me say a little bit about both decisions. The chancellors and presidents of the Big Ten institutions are the board of the Big Ten and make these decisions. And in the middle of August, we were in the following situation. We had hugely varying protocols across schools. Some schools were doing extensive testing. Some schools were doing no testing. We had schools that didn't have contact tracing in place. And we did not think we could put teams in the field together in close contact, because you can't do distancing when you play football in a responsible way and safely under those circumstances. Secondly, we thought we wouldn't get through the season, that there'd be enough infections coming up that you'd be constantly canceling games, and you really wouldn't have an effective season at the end of the day. And thirdly, there was this growing evidence about heart involvements among athletes that was very new and recent, but very worrisome. And we didn't know enough about that. And we said, look, we don't think we can play safely. We're going to postpone this. And unless we can answer these questions, we're going to keep the season postponed. Well, we had a medical group that got together that had representatives from all of the schools. These are the doctors, not the coaches, right? A month later, they came back and said, we've looked at all of these questions, and they have a recommended set of protocols. First and most importantly, and the Big Ten has taken this on, the Big Ten has now contracted with an outside national vendor who is providing tests and overseeing the testing of every single student athlete and coach as they move into their season. So this started for football a week ago Wednesday, and every morning, the whole football team, all of the coaches, anyone else working with the team gets tested, and by the time they are 15-20 minutes have passed, they find whether they're positive or negative. And If they are positive, they're pulled out. I'll come back to that. But the issue then is that you've got negatives and you're going out to practice that morning with a clean field, right? With everyone who's testing negative, or you're going out to play with a clean field with that type of daily testing. We've got very clear protocols about what happens if you test positive. You're out for 21 days. In the last week of that, you will get a full heart workout. If there are any heart abnormalities, you're out for the season. And we've done a full heart workout on all of our athletes who tested positive over the summer, not just those who are testing positive going forward. So, with all of this in place, the questions that the presidents and the chancellors had largely been answered. And, our students really wanted to play. Given that, we decided that we would plan a season. It's a short season. It's going to go fast. It'll finish before Christmas. And if we're able to play championships, that would be great. But I feel comfortable with that decision. I might note one of the key issues here that we all voted on was no fans in the stadium, no tickets being sold. We are going to have the referees and officials and the teams on the field. Turns out there are an amazing number of people that adds up to. The press are going to be in the field and the TV crews because they need to watch the game in order to report on it. And then the student athletes can all bring a small number of family, and they will be seated in the stadium. So there are going to be some 500-600 family members. It's both teams, of course, and they're 100 some plus students on each team. And they're going to be seated apart. They're going to wear masks. There's no band. There's no Bucky. There's no pep squad. The announcement is going to be much softer and lower. And we're telling everyone, and I'll say this to the alums, think about every game as an away game. Don't come to Madison. There's nothing going on campus. There is no tailgating. If you've tried to tailgate in one of our parking lots, you will be fined. We're using our students to message to other students that watch the game with a small group of friends in your pod. Don't go to big parties. Don't violate public health ordinances about the size of gatherings. We will be policing neighborhoods and looking for that. And we don't want that happening. We don't want to threaten the community health by the fact we're playing a football game. And we're asking everyone to follow those guidelines. So that's a long answer to that question.
And a serious admonishment. We'll be polishing up that red carpet for next season.
I want everyone to watch the games, but watch them at home. Yeah.
Understood. Question from Steve Kazan. Is there a cost to the COVID testing, and how much are we spending on it right now? And then how much contact tracing is being done? And on the testing, who is actually doing that?
So we worked through the last several months of the summer to set up our own testing lab, which is, and doing our own PCR testing, which is the gold standard of this. That wasn't quite ready to go at the beginning of the semester, so we were outsourcing most of our testing at that point. We're now insourcing almost all our testing. It's costing us about $23, $24 a test. The outsourced tests were costing $100. So we were very eager to get to our own testing lab. And one of the reasons we've been able to increase our testing is our own testing labs are up and running, and we've expanded capacity there. Contact tracing, we were working very closely with the county. We are training our own people to work with everyone on campus. So it's not on the county to have to do contact tracing for our students or faculty or staff. But we, when we spiked, we didn't have enough contact tracers. That was part of our problem. We have doubled the number of contact tracers. We have some 50 to 60 people. Since our numbers went way down, we're now using them for contact tracing for some other groups because we don't need them all on campus. But they were all trained by Dane County Public Health and are following all the Dane County Public Health guidelines and contact tracing. And if we need more of them again, we have them available.
Great, thank you. Question from Nazos Lazaridis. With the cuts instituted across campus, are you concerned about losing key faculty and staff?
Yeah, so we haven't implemented a lot of cuts across campus yet. As I say, we've done some furloughs that affected everybody for a few days. And, we've done a whole bunch of things to freeze hiring and salaries, that type of thing. We've not really cut programs. That's sort of the next step of things to look at. When we ran into some very big budget cuts right at the beginning of my tenure in 2014 and 15, the problem there was we were getting huge cuts from the state, and that wasn't happening in any other state. And we got very badly rated because we were doing huge budget cuts and none of our peers were. This is a very different world right now. there's not a university in the country that isn't in deep budget difficulty. And the publics are on average in deeper problems than the privates, but even the privates are just bleeding money right now. So that's going to make the rating problem a little less worrisome. There's not going to be a lot of hiring this next year. And most universities are not going to be able to go rating, to be honest. So my real goal is I've got to come out of this as fast as everybody else so that I keep my faculty from being rated.
Now, aren't we handicapped a bit, though, because we lack an important tool that many of our peers have, and that is bonding authority?
Yeah, I've talked about this so many times in the 7 years that I've been here. We're a $3 billion organization, and we have a huge cash flow problem right now that is all going to go away when we come back to normal. You know, our auxiliaries are going to be making all the money they normally make. Our tuition dollars will be back to where they fully were. What does any $3 billion organization do? They do some borrowing to smooth the bad years with the good years, right? It's the way you manage yourself in any serious financial way. We are the only flagship university in the country. UW system is the only major system in the country that has no borrowing authority. And that just handy, particularly in this environment. Many of our peers are doing big borrowing. Now, we can argue about how much should you borrow and how much should you budget cut, but some borrowing in a world where you're having a short-term cash flow problem is an absolute financial tool that any reasonable university would use. And you know, our new president, Tommy Thompson, well known here in Wisconsin as our ex-governor, is very well aware of this. You know, we've been working on this for 7 years. We haven't gotten anywhere. We have not been able to persuade the state that this is just crazy. If this year, with the financial problems we are in, do not get us borrowing authority, I'm just going to give up and go home, because I don't know what could make it clearer that they need to bring their university into the modern age.
Thank you. Question from Keith White. How has the admissions office handled this challenge? You noted that we brought in a class that met most of our targets, maybe even exceeded some. How did we pull that off? Wasn't it a more challenging year for admissions to project?
It was a real challenging year for admissions, largely because they had no idea how many people were going to accept or what, you know, it was just all of this happened in March, and students make decisions in April, and we just didn't know. Were we going to have half the number of acceptances as usual? Were people going to accept and then all change their mind and take a gap year? We really, who was going to return and who wasn't. And so the result was they, of course, went deeper into their admissions pool. We admitted more tranches later in the year. We did a number of waitlist admissions over the summer. And we met our targets, and we wanted about 7,300 students and 1,000 transfer students, and we were right on. As I say, our class looks a little different than our classes in previous years. There's about 1 or 2 percentage fewer international students, and there's 1 or 2 percentage fewer coastal students, and a little bit higher Wisconsin and Minnesota students. As I said, easier to get people who are close to home in this year. That does affect our tuition a little, because of course we were, 1 to 2% that are in-state versus out-of-state affects your revenues. But our admissions office, I just thought, did a superb job of landing a class that is right on the target that we had for them. And, I take my hat off to them. I don't know that any of us thought they could have done that, but they did it.
Great.
Yeah.
Question from Derek. Why haven't we turned to the rapid response saliva COVID test as a means to quickly identify and isolate cases on campus? We're still using the PCR test.
Yeah, so, we did have a medical group that's worked with us all through July and August as we were setting this up. And at that point, this group was quite clear that we needed to use PCR tests and not saliva tests. And the problem here was saliva tests at that point were not approved for widespread use. You had to get what's called an emergency use authorization to use it. Now, the University of Illinois did a very different choice. They went towards saliva testing. Their emergency use authorization came through, I think, a week and a half before classes started. Had that not come through, they would have had no testing plan at all. And, so we can argue about whether we made the right decisions or not on that. We made the decisions that I think really made sense at the time and were the lowest risk and the ones we knew we could deliver with the highest quality testing. And I should say over time, some of the saliva testing has improved in quality compared to the PCR tests and where it was at the end of the summer. as we're looking towards the spring and what we're going to do in the spring. We're hoping to expand testing, and we're looking exactly at some of these saliva tests as one of the options that we have available for that.
Yeah, I was aware you were doing some exploratory work on that even last week. We had a site visit, I think. So,
yeah.
Question from Jen Sip. What's the plan for second semester, and what criteria will be used to bring students back to the dorms in January?
So as I say, we're really looking at spring semester, and I'm not quite ready to make major announcements here. I hope that we could do more expanded testing of the entire campus community come spring semester, if we can land that and think that we can deliver on that. Right now we're testing everyone in the dorms, but most other people, we're doing surveillance testing. We're doing some random sampling across campus. But other than that, you sort of have to walk in and ask for a test. Now, anyone can walk in and get a free test. We've got 3 testing places across campus that are completely open to anyone who wants it. But that's not the same as, having testing of the whole campus community once or twice a week. And we're looking to try to deliver on that. And if we can deliver on that, I will have no hesitations about repeating a hybrid semester where we bring people back to campus and at least have some of the smaller in-person classes, and our study space is open, our library is open, repeat basically what we've been doing now.
Have we tweaked the timing and how that semester will run?
Oh, yeah, good comment. We actually canceled spring break. Not everyone is happy about that decision either. But, we did not want a week in the middle of spring semester where everyone went away and came back. We thought that, just like we didn't want everyone to go away and come back at Thanksgiving. So we're starting the semester a week later and running straight through. And we have a 3-day weekend, a 3 or 4 day weekend somewhere in the middle of that, but not a full week of spring semester. And, I think that's the right thing to do, even though that'll be pretty intense over the full spring.
Maybe we could have a jump around that weekend.
Yeah, something.
Okay. Question from Dean Martin. What is the greatest short-term need for the campus for the rest of this 1920-21 academic year, in your opinion?
Expand our testing capacity. Make sure we can test a larger share of campus more frequently. That's the best way to control infections and feel safe about everything else that we're doing.
And donations to the Chancellor's annual fund or our COVID support fund would help us with that, I'm sure.
Having said that, let me go back to the racial justice issues, because I say that's a long-term issue. That's not a short-term issue. One of the things that I've announced, as you know, Mike, is a hope that we're going to raise $10 million for additional scholarships, particularly for targeted minority students and low-income students. And I really invite anyone who's interested in being part of that and helping our university attract more students of a more diverse group, more first gen, more Pell Grants. We welcome to have a conversation with you about some of that and about deepening our scholarship pool.
And that's $10 million by year end. That's
my goal.
Opening ante on that campaign.
Yeah, that's my goal.
Okay. Question from Lynn S. It is hard to imagine more challenges than what we're facing now, but what are the risks that are still out there for our successful recovery? What do you see as the big risks today?
So, I think the biggest risk is the question of what's going to happen to the state budget next year. As many people here know, Wisconsin is in a 2-year budget cycle. And so we're in the second year of a 2-year budget. And we've seen, as I noted, money taken away from both of those years, with leaving us $40-50 million below what we were promised at the beginning of that cycle. But it's this next spring that people are going to set the budget for the next 2 years. And the state budget in Wisconsin is not in any better shape than the state budget anywhere else. And if what we're facing now is largely a short-term cash flow problem, athletics revenue is going to be back next year if we're more normal. The union revenue is going to be back. State budget cuts don't come back. Those are base budget cuts. And if we get big cuts from the state, we're going to have to do major cuts of programs and staff across campus. And that is our biggest long-term recovery risk, that at the time that the privates will be coming out, they'll be back to normal and recovering. We suddenly are going to be facing big budget cuts coming from the state. And I might say this is going to be true of many of our public peers. And that is going to prolong the pain of this potentially for years to come yet, until the state gets back to normal. That to me is the biggest long-term problem coming out of the COVID crisis.
We're getting some audience questions I see about commencement. How will you conduct commencement in December 2020 and May 2021? Any thoughts on that?
So December, we've already announced, is online. I just don't see that we have any other choice. Of course, December is always inside of the Kohl Center. You can't put 25,000 people or whatever it is, 15,000 in the Kohl Center. And particularly as we're inside and what's happening with COVID crisis in Wisconsin. I don't know about next spring. I'm just not making any comments on that yet. We obviously had an online and virtual commencement last spring and promised all those students we'd bring them back and do something in person. I would love to believe we might be at a place by whatever the date is, the 10th or the 11th of May, to do something different this spring, but it's just going to depend on what happens over the winter and the spring with regard to vaccines and recovery from all of this. We will do an in-person session if we are not yet in a place in this country where we think we can gather. It's 45,000 people in Camp Randall. That has to be safe.
I know you've got a busy week ahead with Board of Regents meetings, our foundation board meetings, the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation board meets. Thinking about your Regents meetings, you alluded to the fact that we have a new interim president of the UW system, former Governor Thompson. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your experience to date working with Governor Thompson and how you're feeling about that.
So Governor Thompson has taken on a sort of the interim job, I think, for 1.5 to 2 years, and sort of see how it goes. I am delighted that he was willing to take this job on. As many of you know, he has a long history of being able to work across the aisle. He knows every political actor in the state. We're in the midst of a lot of really important conversations in the state. We've already talked about the borrowing conversation, the budget conversation. One of the things that we've gotten from the governor is funding to help pay some of our testing costs using some of the federal dollars the governor got. President Thompson freed up a lot more money for that than some of us thought he was going to get. He says he is going into this next budget cycle and he's going to get us a budget increase. And that will allay my risk that I just talked about. I certainly hope he's able to do it. And I have to say, if there's anyone can do it, it is him. He comes in with an enormous amount of energy, a very strong sense of commitment and love for the whole system. But he's, I will note, a graduate of the University of Wisconsin in Madison and quite faithful and loyal to us as well. It's really focused on getting some things done. And that's really valuable, not just getting us through the COVID crisis, but is really looking at a forward-thinking agenda. So there's some things around system changes that we're working on. There's some things around opening up some new revenue streams. And, he's enthusiastic and ready to just help us in any way he can to move forward. So I've been really delighted working with him, and I'm just really pleased that he was willing to take on this job.
Yeah, it sure seemed like quite a great save at the last moment on a search that didn't pan out the way everyone had hoped. So really great to have him in that role. Others wonder if you could share a little bit about what you think some of the most important things being done on campus are related to COVID research and possibly some clinical trials that might go on at UW-Madison.
Yeah, we have people jumping into COVID research with both feet. I think there is close to 400 proposals that have either been gone in for funding or been funded. It's a minority of those have been funded, but a lot of them are still under review. So that we've gotten, I think, over $30 million already in funding for different COVID projects. And that's everything from, vaccines and treatment research to research in the social sciences on the impact of COVID in low-income communities, or its impact on Hispanics, or how are families coping with these K-12 educational changes. So it's a wide range of impact on COVID and what the effect it's having here. I'm particularly proud of some of the things we're doing on the medical side. We have several clinical trials running. We're doing a trial for this AstraZeneca vaccine that got paused for a small period of time, but the trials have restarted. We're doing trials on this experimental set of treatments that was given to President Trump over the past weekend. Some of those trials are going on here on campus. So we're really in the middle of this conversation. And, that's good. I have been told that we've gotten more COVID research dollars than many other schools. We're at the very top of among the list of schools that are being funded for COVID research right now.
3 or 4 years from now, as we look back at this time, how do you think we might have changed as a university, and how do you think student interests might change in terms of their majors? Do you think, there are some pretty pronounced trends right now, students flowing into areas related to data science and computing. Do you think this is going to bring kind of spur interest in other areas, and what might they be?
Yeah, I think one of the big issues is going to be a lot more students who are interested in the whole biological area. Crises like this get people really interested in what it is that generated them. I think there's going to be an interest in more people going to medical school, more people going into various types of biological research, into disease-related research, all of which is good. We need lots of good people there. It's a little like, as you know, Mike, when you go through a recession, undergraduate majors in economics soar, because everyone's really interested in trying to understand what's happening in the economy. And, this economic slowdown will probably help the economics majors as well. All of that said, I don't think these trends of vast increases in the number of people interested in computers, computer science, AI, data science is going to slow down either. That's going to continue to increase. And I do believe that this whole conversation around racial justice and racial inequities is going to increase our students' interest in those areas as well. And we've got some top scholars studying in that area for students to come work with.
We have a question, I think, from a parent wondering what we're doing. Are we educating students about the COVID crisis itself and educating them about tests and the importance and how do the tests work? Anything like that going on, some applied learning?
Yeah, so, we're obviously doing everything we can to message about the health protocols and the importance of testing and when you have to test and, what you should be monitoring for in terms of symptoms. But I hear that parent asking, perhaps, are we doing more to educate about some of the underlying science with all of this? One of the classes that I'm really excited about, we tried to mount in a world where we were afraid a lot of freshmen would feel a little lost. We tried to mount 2 really big classes and encourage a lot of freshmen to take one or the other. One of them is on social movements and protest movements, and the other is on pandemics and the history of pandemics, and covers the range from how do pandemics change medical science and what's the medical response to them, to how do they change settlement and geography patterns, to what's their economic response, to what's the social impact on families and on demographics. And I'm told that both of those classes have generated a lot of interest and are really, obviously speaking to the issues that a lot of our students are thinking about right now.
Chancellor, what do you, I'm going to ask you a question myself. What do you think the long-term ramifications of the crisis will be for universities when it comes to things like remote work, which has become all the rage, of course, these days? We're doing this program remote. We've never had bigger alumni events than we do now, as you know. And neither of us get on a plane and go anywhere. Now, we miss that human contact, but what do you think the impact will be on remote work? And how do you think this is going to affect the urbanization trends that we've seen in the United States? A lot of people are wondering if cities are going to maybe lose their allure a little bit. Any thoughts about that?
So, I'm a strong believer that there are a lot of opportunities in telework, and we've shown that in these last several months. And I think that's going to be true across the country, that more people who are in certain types of jobs are going to find that at least spending some of their days at home make them more productive than commuting in and, all the time and other energy that takes. On the other hand, I strongly believe that telework and working from home is not the answer for a lot of people in a lot of jobs. If you happen to have small children at home, as many people are discovering where they're trying to run homeschool while work at the same time, that's really tough. If you really, sort of want to go to work and have a quiet place where you can work. If you've got a work group that changes or where new people are coming in, I have found that this video stuff works really well with a group of people who know each other. and have worked together. It works really badly when a new person comes in because you get no chance at all to get to know them in the way that you do before and after meetings and meeting them in the hallway. You just sort of do some business with them, and they're a complete cipher outside of that. So I can see a world where more people spend 2 or 3 days a week working from home, but there's still a group that comes together regularly, that there's some interaction, you get to know each other, you bring new people in, you develop new skills, and it's a both and. One of the big advantages of that for a university where we feel like we're always out of space is, when you change to that type of work pattern, you don't need as much space as you did before. And we're going to have some real opportunities to expand space in programs where we really do need space, I think, by contracting the space of some other programs that are going to do much more of this mix between telecommuting and coming in the office. And, maybe there are different days when different people are in. I think that's going to make us much more productive. And I think rethinking where are the places that actually working from home makes you more productive, and who are the people who want to work from home? And then most importantly, how do you monitor that if you're a supervisor, to make sure, again, there's some jobs that it's quite easy to monitor what people are doing at home. There's some jobs where it's not. And all of us are rethinking that. And I think that's just going to change the flow of work. And you combine that with the fact that we've all learned a lot more about how to hold meetings without traveling. There's not a substitute for getting together face to face for some committees and some professional groups. And these big conferences are wonderful. And you go there to network as much as anything else. But, when the executive committee meets 4 times a year, you don't have to travel to DC or New York or California. You can do that by meetings, and everyone's happier. So it's really going to be interesting to see how work changes. I don't know about the urbanization issue. I think a lot of people love cities. And cities have a lot of things going for them. Maybe not right now with museums and theater and art and restaurants, and that's not going away. People are going to love living in cities just as much a year from now as they did a year ago. I don't know about the urbanization trend turning around too fast.
Well, thank you for your thoughts. I guess I just want to give you the chance for any concluding remarks you want to share with our alumni who joined us tonight, and then we'll wrap things up.
So I do want to say thank you to all the alumni for all the support you provide. I have gotten the question at times from alumni about what can we do, right? How can we help? And I will tell you a number of things you could do. First of all, if you know students on campus, check in with them, see how they're doing, give them a little support. And if you know faculty and staff and students, I would really say, faculty and staff, and, just say thank you for all of the frustrations and changes and everything else that they are doing. Thirdly, if you're anywhere near the state of Wisconsin, please communicate with your legislators about the importance of the university, particularly in a world where, science is going to get us out of this pandemic. If ever we have proved the value of the sort of university research that places like the University of Wisconsin engage in, it has been the last 6 months. And the importance of supporting these organizations is just so clear right now. Not just for the education, but for the research of the science as well. And communicate that to your local legislators, particularly as we go into the budget negotiations next year. And then lastly, those of you who do have the capacity to give, and even if it's only $10, we appreciate it and can use it. Find some place around the university that you're passionate about, and get involved. Get involved as an advisor, get involved as a mentor to students, but get involved as a donor as well. I appreciate all of the work that our alumni do, and I can't say thank you often enough.
Well, Becky, thank you. It is always great to have you with us. Really appreciate all that you've done for the university during this difficult time. And I guess I'll see you again tomorrow. And
I'll see you tomorrow, I'm sure.
We'll keep going after it.
All right.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Take care.
All right. Bye-bye. And we'll be back on UW Now next week, Thursday, October 15th. It's the start of the 10th annual Wisconsin Science Festival. And we're going to have experts who are working on COVID-19 and in particular the social effects of the pandemic information flow that we've all been overloaded with, of course. And we'll also have a special show on Monday, October 12th, dubbed The Real Town Hall. It's UW faculty panel on foreign relations, trade, in geopolitics in 2021 and beyond. I'd also like to give a shout out to the UW Zoological Museum. They are the ones who produced the fantastic fish poster I'm using as my backdrop tonight. I did a little home renovation work here and have moved my office location, so I'm no longer backed up by the world map, but you've got the fishes of Wisconsin. So thanks for joining us. Great to be with you again, and on Wisconsin.